Hi, this is Michael Riley, host of the Open Soul podcast. This special edition was produced by students of our podcast guest training program in October 2024. This training is designed for anyone with little to no experience to become an interesting and engaging guest on any podcast, where you'll be able to inform, entertain, and self-promote after just a few in-person classes. If you would like information about attending one of our workshops in the Phoenix area, please shoot us an email, opensoulpodcast@gmail.com.
You're listening to the Open Soul Podcast.
Welcome to the Open Soul Podcast. This is a special edition. I'm your guest host, Karen Gail Iranpour, and it is my pleasure to introduce my guest, Nazareth Corinthian. Welcome, Naz. I'm so excited that you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you currently live, and how you came to be aware that the place of spiritual wisdom was close by?
Yes, thank you, Gail. So I am currently based out in Northwest Peoria, and I found the place of spiritual wisdom when I was driving on the way to dance class with my grandmother. We have a line dancing class together, and the place that we dance at crosses the path of where the place of spiritual wisdom is. And so one day we were driving, and I kind of looked to my right, and I saw that it was right there. It said metaphysical store. And me and my grandma we've always been interested in the metaphysical stuff. And so I said, hey, look, there's this it says metaphysical store right there. And she almost slammed on a brake. She goes, what? And so the rest is pretty much history. After dance one day, she stopped in and she spoke with the owner. And we began attending the coffee and conversations, and we've loved it ever since.
Well, that is wonderful. I heard you say that you've always been interested in metaphysical subjects.
Truth.
There is a broad variety of different metaphysical subjects. What first piqued your interest in this area of life?
The very first thing that I would say immediately piqued my personal interests was that of sound healing and using sound frequencies as a healing modality to help people physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Can you tell me a little bit more about sound healing?
Yeah, I'd love to. So sound healing, in essence, is the act or the art of using any types of sound. It doesn't always have to be music. People want to say music, but it doesn't always have to be music. It can just be noise in general, but using sound and the frequencies that sound gives off as kind of like a surgical practice, right? Like it's non-invasive, obviously, but it's kind of performing surgery on the body as well as on the soul, in terms of the specific sounds that you use to target they could be illnesses, they could be certain emotional imbalances or disturbances, but just the general idea of it is that if you play a certain sound or you make a certain noise, then it will cause the client or the person that is receiving the healing to feel a certain way. And then their immediate response afterwards is they're like, well, why did I just feel that way after I heard this sound? And so then you dive deeper into that, and then you dive deeper into that, and then you realize that you had this hidden trauma that was stuck in your gut since you were like 9 years old that could have come from a plethora of different locations. So it's this really deep and complex worlds that all just comes from playing a few notes.
That is fascinating. Well, you just mentioned playing a few notes, but you also mentioned that it's not always music that you use. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the tools that you use to produce the sounds?
Yeah, so I like to use instruments because I think that they sound prettier, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. However, when sound healing as a modality first began, there was not as broad of a selection of instruments to use. So what shamans is what I'll use the term of. What shamans used to use is just like the elements: water, earth, air, and fire, and the noises that those elements make. The emotions that evoke within a person whenever they hear the sound of a fire crackling, or whenever they hear the sound of rushing water, or when they hear the sound of a pebble dropping on the ground or a boulder dropping on the ground, right? And then like the wind, like, gusting through your hair, right? Those all create feelings. Those all do things in the psyche, right? Because as human beings, we're constantly processing information. And as human beings on the planet Earth, we constantly process information with emotions. So we just naturally come up with reasons to feel scared about certain things or angry about others or sad about others, right? And so I like to use instruments because instruments tend to be very calming. And that's kind of the goal for me is first and foremost, I want the client to be comfortable and I want them to be calm. Because when you're in that state and you're just in that kind of like peaceful neutral, then that's where the ground is laid for things to just start popping up that you might have never known were there.
That is fascinating. So with instruments, there comes a variety of sound frequency ranges. How do you select what range is applicable to what client?
Oh, that's great. I love that. So every person usually has, obviously they have different tastes in music. Some people like heavy metal and some people like classical. Some people like pop, some people like rock, right? And so that goes a long way whenever it comes to the selection of instruments. And me as a sound healing practitioner, you can kind of tell by the little nuances and how people react based on what sounds you make and what instruments you use. You can tell whenever somebody's enjoying a certain frequency or sound or instrument. You can tell whenever it's not really sitting well. And it's all really in like the body language. They just kind of like, they'll either wince or they'll just kind of like, my thing, I know first and foremost when somebody's like reached that calm state is when they take a deep breath. Because when they release that deep breath and they're like bam, like they're in. So it's a lot of trial and error, but you kind of you build up this practice of making a habit out of catching, the whether somebody is enjoying or disliking a certain sound, and then you just kind of like build your routine accordingly.
Well, so what I'm hearing you say is that the human body stores trauma within the body itself, and through observing body language, you're able to identify where that trauma is needing some healing, and the body is the one communicating with you.
Yeah, bingo. You said it a lot better than I did in way less words.
If someone wanted to see if you were accepting new clients, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
So I am at the Place of Spiritual Wisdom pretty often. I try to make it to every Friday at Coffee and Conversation. It starts at 10 a.m. As well as I go to a Tarot and Treats class, which is every Tuesday and Friday, but I'm usually found at the ones on Tuesdays, and that's at 2 p.m. And every now and then you might even catch me at a Saturday going to Carla's Drum Circle, which is at 5 p.m.
Wow, they've got a lot of activities at the Place of Spiritual Wisdom. Can you tell me a little bit about Coffee and Conversation? What kind of things do you talk about?
Yeah, I'd love to. We talk about like everything but the kitchen sink. There's, like I said, it starts at 10, and whenever you walk through the door, you have the selection of coffee and different treats throughout the week. And the owner will mention, she'll go through the calendar of some of the classes that are coming up, some of the things that you don't want to miss. And then we'll go into like a guided group meditation for about 10, 15 minutes. And that like really levels the place out. You can tell like the energy shift after we come out of the meditation. And then that kind of sets the grounds to just talk about whatever catches our fancy. I mean, some days it can range from extraterrestrials, and some days we'll talk about seeing angels in the clouds, and just a variety of different things. It's different every week.
Well, you mentioned that you and your grandmother were driving past. You noticed the metaphysical sign, and she came in and spoke with the owner. What was your first time that you came in, and what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, so my first time here at the Place of Spiritual Wisdom was actually at a Coffee and Conversation, and I walked in the door and I was like, wow, look at all of these people. that are all looking at me. Why is everybody looking at me? and then I was kind of almost intimidated at first, but then there's a lovely lady by the name of Laurel who's just so incredible, and she made me feel very comfortable. She gave me like this big bear hug, and I quickly learned that, they weren't like menacing glares. They were very like inviting, welcome, gazes, and so that energy that I felt of like the nervousness, kind of the anxiousness, was just immediately transmuted into that of love and just total camaraderie. And so I kind of got a little obsessed with it. And I have enjoyed coming to every Friday ever since.
That's absolutely beautiful. So, from your perspective of someone who is a regular at Coffee and Conversation, and based on your own experience, would you say that you've observed new people receiving the same kind of treatment?
Yeah, totally. I think there's always a constant and steady influx of new people that are coming to, wherever they're at in their journey. Some of them come in and they're new, but they're like really advanced along their path. Some people are brand new. And every time somebody walks through the door, they're always looking for something different. And that always leaves the door wide open to receive the healing that we all get.
Well, that is wonderful. That is absolutely beautiful. Would you say that you've made a lot of good friends here?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would even go further than that and say that I feel like I've come up with like a family here.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Everybody's been so great and so kind.
And there's a variety of different talents that are available here. Have you learned of new modalities or developed new interests just from being exposed to some of the practitioners here?
Yes. Yeah. I've learned from things like tarot. Tarot was one of the things that I got interested after I started coming to the place of spiritual wisdom. And also like anything psychic. There are a lot of psychic type classes here, like psychic development. And there's another class, mediumship lights, which is just incredible. Sometimes you're like in it and it's very like interactive and you kind of like have a role. And then another times you're kind of like on the back burner and you're observing, but you're getting like the equal amount of like just intense revelations and just newfound knowledge. It's great.
That is wonderful. It is so important as we grow in age, especially. You're pretty young compared to a lot of people that frequent the place of spiritual wisdom. But it is so important to maintain an active mind and a passion for life, and being exposed to new ideas is invaluable.
That's so true. I agree.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having joined us today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I am looking forward to seeing you next Friday at Coffee and Conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Gail.
You're listening to the Open Soul Podcast.